As exciting and fun as they are, scary stories can inspire us to look inward, to learn something about ourselves, especially when they're personal experiences. Real or not, ghosts, monsters, aliens or not, the experience affects our beliefs and our fears. Tonight, on part 2 of our terrifying tales, all of our guests share personal experiences, and with the exception of 2 of them, I was around to witness the events. And the last story in the episode is my account of a very real, strange, and terrifying incident I experienced years ago. Still, the scariest moment in my life. This is a study of strange. Welcome to the show. I'm Michael May. Thank you all for listening to the Halloween special Terrifying Tales. It is part 2 tonight. If you haven't listened to part 1, I encourage you to do so. Now, a little bit of business before we get started. I announced that I'll be reading new reviews a few weeks ago. So I'm going to read 2 tonight to start that off. And if you want a review read, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and you can take a screen grab of that and then email me astudyofstrange@gmail.com. And I want to thank a handful of podcasters, you know who you are, who suggested that I do this. To start, this is from JMB, who says, "Awesome, looking forward to more." Thank you, JMB. And then another review from Thompson, who says, "Love it, really looking forward to more episodes." Reviews are so important for podcast, and I really appreciate it. So the last bit of business tonight, because I really want to get into the stories quick this evening, we have an additional Halloween special, an in-depth interview with horror filmmaker icon Tom Holland, who's behind Child's Play and Fright Night and many, many other great movies. I got to talk to him about his career as well as his new book, Fright Night Origins. That interview will be released a few days before Halloween. I don't know exactly which day, so if you want to listen to it, and I hope that you do, make sure that you're subscribed to the show so it'll pop up in your feed when that episode drops. And now to the terrifying tales. We're going to start tonight with Mali Elfman, a filmmaker and an old friend of mine, and a lot of her current work, which she will talk about in this interview, deals with questioning what ghosts are and our relationship to them. So we ended up having a bit of a longer conversation than will be in the episode. If you're interested to hear the whole thing, I have put that out on Patreon, so you can find information for that from our website, astudyofstrange.com. Now, the only tee-up I'm going to give to this story is that it happened years ago when we first met, when we were working on the production of a short film called The Price, and we were filming that in an old studio in downtown Los Angeles, which is supposedly haunted. Here's the story. Hey, Molly, thanks for sharing a story. You're going to actually tell a story that involves me. So
That's true. That's right.
It's something that may have been paranormal and I was around for, and I always say I want to experience something ghostly, and this might have been a thing. I don't know. So yeah, how do you want to start? Do you want to just dive into it, or?
Yeah, I guess so. It's also interesting because this is how we first met.
Yeah.
Is it 12 years ago? I think it's
Yeah.
12 years ago, but it's funny because we have gone on to work on a number of projects together.
Yeah.
I don't even know. But this was our bonding experience, I guess, brought us together, which is, I guess, it's actually a really daunting thing. What you asked is tell a ghost story. And I'm like, okay, well, which one? What type of ghost story? What's the vibe? Because I grew up with ghosts. I am a firm believer in ghosts and not in a way that I'm afraid of them in at most times, but I do believe in experiences just because I've had so many at this point.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because I actually forgot about this. Because I've been asking so many people, hey, do you have a scary story you want to tell? And obviously I'm going to go to you with that. So you're one of the first people I asked, but I actually forgot about your upbringing and the house you lived in. Is that something you can share? Or do you want me to cut that question out?
No, I can talk about that. I like to have conversations, as you know, on fear and how
Mm.
we learn to be afraid and where fear comes from. I wasn't afraid of the things that most other people were afraid of because I was dealing with it on an everyday basis. I grew up in a house that was notorious for having a woman murdered in it. There were things that appeared in the mirror. There were footsteps every single night, kind of almost cliche ghost things that I would come to see later in movies and be like, well, that's not scary. That's just every single night. Sounds of shattering glass in the same room that the woman was murdered in, bullet holes appearing in the glass one day right before
Oh.
Christmas. And it was very funny because I'll never forget that experience. My mom just seeing this, it's a ghost story to preempt the ghost story, but was me, my mom sitting in the TV room watching TV, and it was like a horseshoe shaped house. There was a big hallway through the middle of it. And all of a sudden, all of the animals running in. And but I mean, all of the animals. We had dogs, we had cats, we had guinea pigs and birds. And so it was like Ace Ventura, like coming through the hallway, all running towards us, which is quite a sight unto itself. And then we walked back, we followed them from where they came from. And in the living room were these holes on the glass. It was this whole living room that had these big glass doors. And what was interesting is only the inside panel had the bullet holes, where the outside panel hadn't been touched. So it would have been a bullet or
Hmm.
something of that nature that would have had that force. And I think this says a lot about my upbringing. My mom just covered it with the curtains because there was a Christmas party coming up, and she said, "Don't tell anybody; they won't come over for the party." And that's kind of how we dealt with fear in my house, and that's how we dealt with scary moments. And so I think it gives me a little bit of a different perspective. And I've often wondered, and this goes to when we met, and something that I was thinking about earlier when you asked me, is what this connection I have to the other side is. It's something that I always felt very willing to be open to, willing to explore, and willing to experience. I seem to have no control over when I experience it or who I'm around when I experience it. So it's something that I only now, as I've gotten older, am starting to kind of question what it was that I experienced when I was a kid.
Yeah. And it's funny. We can talk about this later after the story, but it's a nice tie-in to the work that you now do. All
Yeah.
right, yeah. So why don't you tell us about the story that happened with me around, and maybe even start with where it was. Do you remember the name of the studio we were at?
Yeah, Lacey Street Studios. We were shooting The Price. And it was very funny because at that time I was still an actor back in the day when I was acting, and I actually got cast in it, which is crazy to me that anybody cast me. Thanks for that, you and Ashley. And yeah, that's crazy. James and Zeke were directing, and they were that. It was such a fun time. It was also, we were all very young. We were all just starting out. That was one of the first shorts that I think I ever acted in. And me being me and you being you, at the end of the day, after both of our jobs were technically finished, I was hanging around, just kind of uh, wondering what I could do to help. And you, being the producer on set and also an actor in it, were also kind of hanging around. And both of us started to go from set and be like, oh, all of these C stands and all of this equipment needs to get back to the truck. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's grab some and let's do it, which I think really lays the groundwork for what our future relationship in the film
Yeah,
industry would be like.
indeed, indeed.
But I just remember chatting, and it was late at night. Everybody was trying to get out of there as quickly as possible. This is a studio that's kind of notoriously haunted, I guess. Has had a lot of horror films shot there. And I just remember being very excited to be there, very young, very enthusiastic, going to help out this other producer. And we decided, maybe, I don't know for what reason, that we were going to go through another piece of the studio. Instead of going back to the trucks where everybody else was, we were going to make a shortcut. And so you grabbed some of the gear and led the way. And then I grabbed some gear and I was following you. And we were walking and we went around, it's a film set. So at first there's a lot of people and there's kind of bustling and there's a lot going on. And then we kind of got to the back of the studio, or to this other area. And I was still kind of, dropping things as I was walking, very clumsily. And I just remember seeing you probably about 40 feet ahead, stop very abruptly. And there was something about the way that you did it that it signified danger. I didn't know what was going on, but it was scary to me. And I remember I stopped because I didn't want to go forward anymore. And you slowly turned, but it was weird because you didn't turn to where I was. You turned and looked at somebody or something that should have been right behind you. And I remember taking this in, and then all of a sudden you looked at me and you said, "Did you just say my name?" And I said, "No, I didn't say your name." And then I walked over to you and you said, "I heard you say my name, but it was as if you were directly next to me." And I didn't know what to say to that. And I said, "Well, it wasn't me." And you said, "But it was your voice." And I remember both of us about at the same moment looking over, and there was this door that was slightly ajar. And I don't know if it opened while we were sitting there. I can't remember that, or if it was just ajar. And both of us had a sense that there was something through that door. And there was this moment of, do we open the door? Do we go through this? And then instead, both of us picked up our C-stands and we just kind of hurried on. But the interesting thing about this was the idea of it being my voice. And this is actually something that has happened to me a few times in my life, where I have had people turn and tell me that I said their name and it was my voice.
Oh.
So this is not actually the only time that this has happened to me. And in fact, it recently happened to me on this production that I just got done with, which is something that of this high intensity and this high adrenalized place that I'm in. I have often wondered what this is. Is this, people talk about a dark shadow that follows you. Is this a ghost that is imitating me? Is it mocking me? Or is there somebody else who is similar to me that is following me around? But everybody seems to, who has had this experience, genuinely feel like it's me. But it's not. Or is it? So that's kind of like, I guess that's more or less a little bit of the story. But I guess one of the things that I'm always curious about is, what is a ghost? Where does a ghost come from? And I also believe that when we die, there are reasons why we stick around. I don't believe that everybody becomes a ghost. I don't believe that we just sit around. I do believe that there is a reason. I often think that that reason is us on Earth. We can't let go of something. There is some type of trauma. There is something that is needed. There is some type of unfinished business. So the question is, why am I still here? What am I doing? What am I holding on to? And why is it that it's reaching out to certain people at certain times? There is a piece of me that wonders if it was the place that we were at, if it had something to do with Lacey. I used to think it was the haunted places that I was going to, but I think the scarier thing that I realized is it's not the places, it's me. And then certain places where I am, it can access me and or those around me more easily. You can make sense of this if you'd like. I don't know that I can.
I don't know if I can either, but I love that I had you come on and tell this, because you talk about this so much more wisely and intellectually than I do, and emotionally as well. So I'm already really loving this. And it is there's a lot of interesting thoughts and questions that you bring up, but most of that is exactly the way I remember it. The only thing I would add to that is I don't remember looking at a door, and except it may have been because we were right where the bathrooms were in this hallway of Lacey Street Studios. Lacey Street is basically an old warehouse in downtown Los Angeles, and they've use it for film and TV productions now. And it can be its own studio. They use it for sets. It looks like an old warehouse. So if you see an old warehouse in a TV show shot in LA, it's likely shot at Lacey Street.
That's true.
And it's like you said, it's famously haunted. The people that run the place claim that it's haunted. The movie Saw, the first one, was shot there, and there's stories of weird happenings during that movie in Lacey Street Studios. Apparently, a lot of the activity is in that hallway with the bathrooms. I swear, and I can still feel it. I can see it. I can visualize everything of hearing your voice right behind me. And the voice wasn't scary. It was turning around and noticing that you were 30 to 40 feet behind me. That's what freaked me out. And I remember just trying to play that off as like, oh, well, it just sounded like you were right behind me, and like trying to be nonchalant about it. And we continued on. But the one thing I kind of want to add to that is after we dropped off the C-stands and equipment and we turned around to go back down through that hallway to return to set, and there was one of our PAs, and I can't remember her name right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh my God, I totally forgot about
Yeah.
this. How did I forget about this?
So
Yeah.
she was coming down that hallway that we were just in, and she had like stopped and was looking around oddly when we saw her, like something had happened to her. And so it was just this weird energy.
Well,
And
she said the same thing. Do you not
yeah.
remember? Yeah, she stopped in the hallway and we looked back and she goes, Molly, did you just say my name? And I remember both of us looking at each other. How did I forget that piece of it? And realizing it wasn't just you hearing my name. It was my voice that was somehow locked in that spot.
It was so clearly your voice. Like it sounded just like you. And yeah, all I heard was Mikey, and I heard that right behind me. And it was really weird. And I'm glad you brought this up when you were trying to think of stories and asked about this, or maybe I even brought it up. I can't remember who, but just by the nature of asking you to come on the podcast and share a scary story made me think about it. Cause I keep saying, cause I've been doing all these like paranormal episodes this month, and I keep saying like, oh, I haven't really experienced anything. And I forgot about this, which is weird to forget about, because you also made a segment for an anthology horror film we produced, Fun Size Horror, that was
literally the short film I directed.
Inspired by that. I played a version of myself with the bad haircut I had at the time. But yes, it's interesting that I have not forgotten about it. I wonder if I just don't want to think about it. I wonder if like the skeptic in me is like, I'm just going to write that off and not even think about it anymore. But yeah, that is easily the strangest experience I've ever had by far.
Well, and it was one that was truly paranormal. And again, this idea of fear, it wasn't innately, it's not scary to hear somebody's voice say your name. It's the idea that they're not connected to it.
I'm going to choose to say that it's you years, many, many, many moons from now, when you've passed on, because time isn't linear. You've chosen to come back and haunt me in that moment. That's what I'm going to choose happened. And
I mean, it does make sense that I would just like fuck with people. Like, I'm not going to scare you too much, but I do just kind of want to mess with your day. I find these portals and places that I can come back through.
Yep.
And I was just excited. I was like, hey, Mikey, I came through a door and I saw
this.
you.
Yeah.
I remember you. I remember this moment.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, like, I've always wondered what would have happened if we would have gone back and gone through that doorway. Maybe that's an episode of something we need to go to.
Maybe that's a good question, Molly. That is a very good question. Well, thank you so much for sharing this story. Before we go, though, just because it ties in so perfectly, you've completed a movie that's coming out soon, Next Exit, which actually deals with the afterlife.
It does.
And it actually addresses some of the topics that you are bringing up. When does that movie come out?
It comes out November 4th. It'll be in limited select theaters, and it'll be on demand at that point as well.
Yeah. And it's about a congressman who
yes, it's all about this congressman who really wants to overturn this one bill.
Played by myself. So yes, everybody check it out, but not for that. No, check it out for the whole movie. I'm in the background.
That was very fun. It was really fun to have you on set that day.
I appreciate it so much. I'll be sending you a headshot later. And then you also, just to plug everything else, you also just wrapped a movie called Birth Rebirth, which is it's Shudder exclusive, isn't it?
Yes, it'll be, it's Shudder, and it'll have additional distribution, which we can't quite announce yet. And that should probably be ready in 2023. That's an all-female Frankenstein adaptation about a woman who wants to birth a child with her mind and not her body.
Yeah.
Fun ensues. And that's with director Laura Moss. And so, it's been... And yeah, the ghostiness, you're absolutely right. In Next Exit, because that's one that I wrote and directed, you're gonna see me working out some of literally, it's, you know what? I'm really glad that I came on this show, because sometimes I forget the experiences that I
Yeah.
had that added into the things that I did. And boy, oh boy, did this play a very small but important part on
Yeah.
an element that is definitely in Next Exit, a world in which we know ghosts exist and we can see, track, and record them on the other side. And, you know, if you want to be one of the pioneers, you can go and join them and become a new type of celebrity.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'll provide some links to all those things and where to see stuff like that in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much, Molly. We talked more than I intended to, but I
That
should have just
happens with
assumed.
us.
That should have just assumed. But I really appreciate what you brought to this. So thank you again for sharing that story and
Thank
scaring
you
me
for having
again.
me.
Thank you.
Oh, good. That's what I'm really here for, you know,
Yeah.
whether I'm in this world or the next.
Next up, we have Zeke Pinheiro, another old friend of mine. And here's where things get interesting, at least for me. Zeke is the co-director of The Price, the film that was happening during Mali Elfman's story. And Zeke and Molly and I had a company called Fun Size Horror where we produced and distributed and promoted a lot of short digital horror content. And I actually interviewed him a while ago for this episode because I knew he would have a scary story. And it's completely unintentional what happened, which is he shared some stories that also took place in Lacey Street Studios at the same time as Molly's story. And again, I did not know he would tell those stories. I had no intention of connecting Molly and Zeke together in their experiences. It just happened. And I find it fascinating. It also makes me question my own beliefs about these things. So without further ado, here is Zeke Pinheiro. Hi, Zeke. Good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
But I have no idea what you're going to share. What type of story are you going to talk about?
I mean, it's a couple of. I've got two. They're short stories, so
Mhm.
I've got two,
Yeah.
and one is an experience that I had at the Disneyland Hotel,
Oh, nice.
and the other is a story with ghosts at Lacey Street Studios, because I
Oh,
also had
nice.
my own little strange occurrence that I experienced while I was there. Actually, a couple, because that place is undoubtedly haunted. So yeah, I'll share those two, and then yeah,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
The Lacey Street studio ones. Well, the first one was our first night of shooting there. You go to Lacey Street and like you could just you look at it and you're like, okay, this place is haunted. It's all old brick. It's an old textile factory from like, you know, turn of the century, into the 18th to 19th century. And yeah, and then it got converted to a studio, and then it became this weird hodgepodge, just people being like, oh, let's build a stage on this thing, and then stages on top of stages, and then yeah, and there's this like kind of creepy warehouse that is connected to this even creepier looking like furnace chimney that's like right front and center in the studio. And behind that is like, you know, some bathrooms. And we were shooting The Price, and we had a lot of night shoots there. And it was our first night shoot. And I went to go use the bathroom. And I was sitting in one of the stalls, and I heard conversation. Like, I was like, you know, crews going around. There was between, like, we'd broken for lunch. I was using the bathroom. And then I heard some people come in and start talking. And I was like, well, it was weird because I couldn't quite understand what was being said. And, you know, and obviously, like, director on the first thing, I'm like, is this the crew? Are they going to be talking shit on me? Like, what info am I going to get? And I couldn't quite understand, but it was clearly like whispered voices in this room, in this bathroom. And, you know, I then, you know, finish up. I open, I hear nobody exit. I open up the door and no one is there. No one is there. Nobody exits. Nobody. It's like the voices just kind of got cut off and stopped. So and then later, was the guy's name Rusty? He was a caretaker there, talking to him about kind
Yeah,
of,
the caretaker had all the stories. Yeah.
yeah, he had all the stories, and he was like, that bathroom in particular, that is a regular occurrence that happens in, talking to him later on. And then the second one was our last night there. And it was last night there. We were running short on time. The lighting scheme of it was just taking too much time, and I was trying to find, our DP so I could talk to him and be like, all right, we gotta, kind of nip this and get moving. And so the shot was, it was an outdoor shot, so it was kind of in this, little enclave, between buildings. And so they were setting up all the lights on the roofs. And so then I was like, he was up on the roof, I was down on the ground, and so I saw the grips unloading equipment from the trucks and then bringing it upstairs. So I went to go follow a grip, and I followed a grip, and I started following this figure up these windy stairs, and then through these different corridors. And I kept, it's like just a little bit ahead. So every time I turn a corner, you'd see the tail end of the person turning the corner. And I followed that shape into a completely empty room, and there was nothing there. There was no other way I could have lost the person. It was just like a straight staircase. Like I kind of like wound up around and then So I found there was a shape. I followed the shape into a totally empty room where it was like windows and stuff, and I could see the crew on the other side of the building, but there was no way for me to get to them from where I was. And so that was very eerie.
I have forgotten about those stories until just now. And the one in the bathroom, I don't even know if you ever shared that with me. I may have just forgotten about it, but it is so interesting because that is outside of that door is where Molly and I had our experience, where I heard her voice behind me. So that is so interesting to hear that. And I do also remember the story of you following the figure upstairs. I think you told me that night, like at the end of the night or the next day, because I remember that happening right away. That is, wow. Lacey Street Studios, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's move on to the Disneyland then. Let's hear that one.
The Disneyland, I think, is like the most, I think probably the most visceral experience I've had with something that could be considered supernatural. I'm sure Proctor skeptics can come up with reasoning for it and everything, but it's, for those unfamiliar with the Disneyland Hotel, you've got a couple of hotels that are newer, but there were originally these 3 buildings. At the time I was staying there, this was the main. There was the main hotel, which is called the Marina, which is where you check in, and there's another one that's facing the park. And at the time, it wasn't long after the downtown Disney and stuff had been built, so it was overlooking downtown Disney, and that was called the Sierra. And then there's another one called the Big Bonita. But yeah, we were staying in the Sierra. So it's been there since I think the late 50s, maybe early 60s. Late 50s sounds more right. We were staying in the side that faces the parks, and at the time, and downtown Disney, and it was, we were sleeping, and I woke up feeling feet walking over me, like child-sized feet stepping over me, several of them, and like a kid walking over the bed and not realizing I was there. And I woke up and was still, feeling that sensation, and I look up at the window, and facing out the window, I see a clear outline of a woman with a beehive haircut. She has this like kind of a bouffant, haircut. And she's looking out the window. And I was just staring at her, and then she turned, like I could see it turn and look at me. And it was weird because suddenly this urge came over me that like I wasn't thinking this at all. I wasn't feeling any sort of, but it was and I've heard of people that have had other ghostly experiences before where they encounter something and they say something as if it's almost like it's like being transferred into your brain. It's kind of what it felt like, because it was like it wasn't there, and then suddenly we make, I guess, what could be considered eye contact, and I just say, "You got to be fucking kidding me," and then it dissipated, and like everything went away, sensations went away, everything, and yeah, that's the entirety of the experience. But yeah, it felt, very much like I've had the experience where you wake up and like you kind of have that, like you're stuck in a bed and you feel the bed tremble and stuff. It's kind of those like night terror experiences. And there was that documentary on night terrors that was really well done. And I'm like,
Yeah, it
okay, yeah,
was. Yeah.
that's probably what that was. Like that wasn't like that was probably a weird, waking dream, experience that happened. But this felt like there was a presence in the room, and it wasn't like a malevolent presence. It wasn't anything, but it definitely felt like I had experienced something that was supernatural.
And so just to ask a question on that, because you bring up, the night terror thing, but like sleep paralysis uh, typically happens. People can't move, right? So
Yeah.
could you move your body? Because it sounds like you did, because you even like looked over at her and stuff. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. I was able to move, and whereas like in the experience that I kind of referred to, I could not move.
yeah, yeah.
But this I could. I could absolutely move.
Oh, that's
And
so
so there
interesting.
wasn't anything that like, yeah, like I felt, like I was laying there for a while, and I had at the time I had a 20-pound cat, back home. And so, sometimes when you sleep in a strange room, in a hotel room, you're asleep and you kind of wake up and you think that like, you're home, and then
Yeah,
you readjust. At first I thought it was that. I thought it was my cat Logan walking over me. And then as I was coming to, I realized, wait, I'm in a hotel. Logan is not here. And then I kind of, that's when I stirred and I sat up. And yeah, then the sensation of the feet walking over me went away. But that's when I saw the woman.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing those stories, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Thanks for having me.
Up next is a story from my brother, Bryan. Now, this story is actually just an excerpt from a longer episode that I recorded for our Patreon channel, but I wanted to include it in the Halloween specials because it's an unexplained event that happened to a handful of skeptics, my brother, myself, and his girlfriend at the time. And I need to tee this up a little bit since you're just hearing an excerpt, but I interviewed my brother about these 3 unexplained events that happened in the house we grew up in when he was an adult. And what happened was our parents had moved out of the house, my brother moved in for a short period of time, and a house where nothing abnormal had ever happened, suddenly my brother experiences 3 different things. And you're only going to hear one of those tonight. And what's also interesting about it is it was never my brother alone. There were always witnesses to these events. And the one you're going to hear tonight deals with some moving furniture. So let's get on to the next thing. Is the next thing the couch?
Yeah, the next thing's the big thing.
This is one of the few experiences in my life where I'm like, ooh, maybe I did experience something paranormal. I don't 100% know. But what I'm extra curious about with this story is hearing you tell it and then how
And how
I
you
maybe
remember it.
remember it. And I'm just fascinated with that. It may be exactly the same.
I may be a really good storyteller, so there's parts of this that you might just shut up and say, you know what? Yeah, that's a better way to remember it.
But here, let me tee it up a
I
little
mean,
bit.
not to say that you're not the movie producer, so
It doesn't matter. I was in town visiting family, and I would always stay with you in my old bedroom in this house. And the one thing, you can go back and start at an earlier place than this, but I just want to say it as a brother because it's such a brotherly thing. We were going to go out to dinner, and you wanted to wait because you had to move furniture around before we left, and I was upset about that.
Feng shui my shit. I mean,
I wanted
really
to just go
come
to
home
dinner
to
and we could
energy
come
levels.
back and move this around. But you were like, no, we got to move all this before we go to dinner.
We've got an after party. I don't want to work before we come back to after party.
So anyway, here, you go ahead and tell the story, and I'll shut up.
Yeah, another scenario. You're in town for a week or two. I had my girlfriend at the time. I can't remember who else. There was definitely somebody else with us too, I think. The scenario was I had just been given our parents' furniture that they were no longer going to use. Or no, it was in this house. It was somewhere else. I had moved out other furniture, and I was moving into the room. A lot of heavier, more robust furniture. So to set it up, right? So when you come into the back door of our home, which is the door we mostly leave and come in from, we never go through the front. Traditional Florida home, we have a sunroom. The sunroom is on the back of the house. It's open windows looking out over the lake. Attached to the sunroom is like a little bar area that's a total see-through, and a walk space to walk from the sunroom into the kitchen, out of the house, right? So this is where 95% of your life is spent. This is your Florida room, you know? So we called it a sunroom. It's a Florida room. I mean, that's really what it is. I had slid out and moved other furniture out of the way, and what I wanted you to do is help me put up these two big Ralph Lauren couches. There was a big white shag wool rug that I put down, and a cast iron table with a solid chunk of glass on it, as well as two end tables that were cast iron with solid glass chunks. And so you had helped me center the rug, put the couches on it, put the table on it, the chair in it. All this shit was heavy. And once you put it down, there ain't no sliding it or moving it around. And especially if it was for you and me to bitch about it, we're beastly men. This was not...
Yeah, I'm giant.
This
huge.
was
That's
not... yeah, no, I mean, you're cut. I mean, I just think of Brad Pitt in Fight Club. I see you just put another 50 pounds. But, you know, like this stuff ain't going anywhere once we set it down. And that's exactly what we did. We set up the room. We looked at it. We said, great job, you know, sweating our asses off and you yelling at me, and we go out to dinner. And so all of us leave the house. And I swear there was somebody else with us, but, you know, that person has been replaced by this ghost that has taken over the story. So at least three of us walk out of the house admiring our accomplishments. And when we return from dinner, flip on the lights. I was not the first person in the house. I think you were. And I think it was you that turned the lights on and said, Bryan, did you move the furniture? And that's when I'm like, oh, fuck you. Let me walk in, and I walk into the back door, peering over the bar. All the furniture had been pushed up and moved over, slid across the room, buckling up the carpet, you know, just something that not easily done. Definitely the air conditioner breeze did not do it. But, you know, we all sat there like, what the fuck? So what's
this is great. No, so the only thing different in my story, not all the furniture was moved. The couch, the big couch that was on the wall that faces the TV, was jutted out from the wall on an angle. So it wasn't
pushing
the whole
the
couch
carpet and the cast iron table.
I don't remember
the leather
table
chair.
moving.
I don't think the leather chair was moved, but definitely the big couch and it pushed out towards the love seat to the opposite corner of the room.
The big couch was like the back. If you're looking at it, the back left side was in the correct place, and the right side had been kind of jutted out from the wall. And I don't remember any other furniture being moved.
but it caused that fat ass carpet
to have
to
been
buckle up and move the cast iron table with the glass piece
I don't
on
remember
it,
the
like,
table being moved. That's
it all
in
shifted over.
See, that's
There's
where
a photograph on a BlackBerry somewhere.
Yeah. No, I don't remember anything else being moved, just the couch. But regardless of the fact, whoever remembers that correctly or not, stuff was moved. Whether it's the couch and the table or whatever, the couch was moved. And I kept thinking, oh, maybe the carpet thing, the rug, caught up under a leg and it like tilted over. And I was like, well, even if that was true, it wouldn't have moved as much as it did. Second of all, that carpet didn't go all the way to the back leg of the couch, right? It was like a, what do they call it?
Halfway.
Area. It was like an area rug. So it didn't go all the way to the back of the wall where the couch's back legs were. But we do both remember the couch being moved. Your girlfriend who was with us, I remember her being like, well, no, maybe did you not push it all the way back before you left? And it's like, no, we put that
our hard effort.
We put that all where it was supposed to go before we left for dinner.
We're all sitting here and we're logical people going, something really happened here that we can't explain. And that's the foundation of the whole lights and furniture.
If you want to hear about all 3 of the experiences that Bryan had in that home, besides the furniture, we would love to see you over on Patreon and listen to that whole episode. Now, next up, we're changing topics, getting away from ghost and paranormal, and we're talking about potential aliens from the very talented Joe Russo. Well, hi, Joe. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'm very excited because you mentioned that this is an alien story you're going to share, correct?
That's right. That's right. Though there's not any like probing or anything like that. But
Right.
But I did have what I think some might refer to as, a close encounter, with the third kind.
Okay. All right. Can I ask you a question
UFO?
before you?
I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. Can I ask you a question before you start, which is, you're from New Mexico, is that correct?
No, I'm not.
Oh, did you go maybe Arizona?
So I grew up in Connecticut. And then I went to school in Arizona.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
And so this actually happened while I was living in Arizona.
That's what I was going to ask, because apparently there's a lot of UFO activity in the Southwest. So that's why I asked that question.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, cool.
So I don't know if you're familiar with a phenomenon called the Phoenix Lights.
I am actually, yes.
Okay. So the Phoenix Lights actually happened years before I lived in Arizona. But, when I was finishing up at school and before I moved to Los Angeles, I was working production on a variety of different movies and TV shows and commercials and what have you. And a lot of the TV was reality TV. I found myself working with a pretty consistent rotating crew of people out of LA who kept referring me for jobs as it goes with production. And so I got offered the chance to be a camera operator on a kind of Mythbusters like sci-fi channel show. I don't think I ever saw the end product, but the gist of the episode was we were going to try to prove or disprove what people might have seen when they did the Phoenix Lights. Mm-hmm. So we went out there and we were doing weather balloon experiments and dropping things out of a plane and seeing what they would look like to the naked eye and different, so we were trying to like replicate all of like what could people have actually seen with the Phoenix Lights. And to give some maybe context, the Phoenix Lights was one of a mass UFO sighting event where lots and lots and lots of people in Phoenix all saw something in the sky. And so we're doing this, and we basically have like one big overnight shoot where we're going to be out in the middle of the desert, kind of near where people reportedly saw the Phoenix Lights. And so, we're filming all sorts of different things. We're filming the hosts, we're filming different experiments, and suddenly someone says, "What's that up in the sky?" Right? And we all kind of turn and look. And up there is a big, bright white light, and it zips to the left faster than I've ever seen anything zip before. And then it zips to the right faster than anything I've ever seen zip before. And it starts doing this like back and forth across the sky. And all the producers are like, point the cameras at the sky. Stop staring at it and shoot it. Yep. Right? So me and all the other camera operators, because reality TV, so you have, a crew of 4 or 5 different people filming everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all whip our, late digital cameras up into the air and point them up at the sky. And we're filming, and I can see this with my naked eye. I can see this thing zipping around the sky like nothing I've ever seen before. No plane, no helicopter, no nothing. And I'm shooting it. And then it zips off and it disappears. It's gone. And we're all like, wow, did we just really see a UFO? And everyone's like, well, thank God we have the cameras. Thank God we got it on tape. Mm-hmm. The next day, there was nothing on the tapes. Cameras couldn't pick up whatever we were seeing with our naked eye.
So was there nothing on the tapes like it
they
was
weren't blacked out? No, there was footage.
Yeah.
There was no the light, whatever we were seeing, the cameras weren't strong enough to pick it up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh man.
So all of that whole experience where we all literally saw something up in the sky isn't in the episode, from what I understand, because we had nothing to prove or show or highlight. So it happened. We shot it. We all saw it. And God, man, I went home and I was like chilled to the bone.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. Not only was it just cold out in the desert, but like the feeling that we might have seen something other, was pretty exciting and scary. And and then and the fact that none of the footage was usable to prove us right or wrong was I think probably the eeriest part.
It has to be. And so what were your thoughts or beliefs on UFOs before you experienced that? Were you somebody that's just like, oh, that would be cool? Or were you hardcore skeptic or hardcore believer?
I would say like in the middle, right? I believe the universe is so big that the odds of us being the only intelligent life form, and I think you could argue if we're actually an intelligent life form. But the odds of us being the only one in this massive amount of matter out in the universe feels extremely unlikely. And that's kind of how I've always kind of thought and believed. So no, I wasn't necessarily going out into the show being like, oh man, I hope we find something, or oh man, I hope we can prove the existence of aliens. It was just like it was a job, it was like they were going to pay me, I don't know, $250 a day to go point a camera at something.
Oh, I absolutely, I know. And I feel like I'm in a very similar boat of, I don't know if I believe in UFOs or not, but I believe the universe is so big that there's definitely something out there. There's definitely life out there. I don't know if it's visited the planet or not, but it could be. If it's out there,
apparently
maybe
it visited Central Phoenix.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it happens. That's where they come.
Yeah, for sure. They're not really good with illegal aliens there, though. So it's not.
That's true. That's
But the funny story was about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years later, I was sitting on the set of a movie I produced called Nightmare Cinema, and our financier was literally just about to release a movie about the Phoenix Lights.
Oh,
and so I got
cool.
to tell him the story, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
You're making a movie about this. So I was like, let me tell you my experience with Phoenix Lights.
Oh, that's amazing.
But I still cannot, for the life of me, explain what I saw. I've never seen anything in the sky like it before or after.
Yeah. And the fact that it moved two directions too, at least two directions, is
because at
that's
first we
really
were like,
interesting.
oh, is
Yeah.
it just like, is it a fast moving plane?
Mm-hmm.
But I've never seen something circle back that quickly.
Yeah. Well, very cool, Joe. No, I appreciate the alien UFO sort of genre interjected into these episodes. Two things I want to bring up before you go, which just occurred to me like seconds ago.
Yeah.
But I talked to you like 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if you remember, to get advice about starting a podcast. Do you remember that?
I do. I think
Yeah.
we went to lunch.
We went to lunch, but this was a phone call probably months or a year later than that, because I've always wanted to do a podcast, and I was curious. You gave me some great advice, but I didn't have time. I was in the middle of production on two things. So in a lot of ways, you're at fault for whatever becomes of this.
For whatever this is.
Whatever this is.
I appreciate you saying that. I'm glad I was able to give you a little bit of a push, and I'm excited that you're doing it.
Yeah, no, I am too. I'm having a blast. And the second thing is, I just want you to be able to, kind of plug anything you're working on. You have a great podcast. You have a lot of projects, it seems, in the works and coming out already. So I just wanted to give you a chance to tell people where to find some Joe Russo work.
Yeah. Well, let's see. The aforementioned Nightmare Cinema is still streaming on Shudder, so you can check that out there. It's a horror anthology, which is pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the Postmortem with Mick Garris podcast. I'm a producer on that, and a regular co-host on the Ask Mick Anything episodes. So you can catch me there wherever you download podcasts. And what else? I just had a movie that I produced that came out called The Greatest Beer Run Ever.
Mm-hmm.
I was a producer on it, and that's on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, I've got to watch it. It looks so good. I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to watch it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and then next year there's a couple things coming, but a couple things in post production. But keep an eye out for The Inheritance on Netflix. That's one I wrote, and I'm pretty excited about it. So.
Oh, nice. And I'll provide some links in the show notes for everybody to check stuff like that out. And Joe, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to finish the Halloween special by sharing a personal story. The most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. The only setup I can kind of give is that I was 11. I think I was 11 years old, and I was at summer camp in Michigan. I went to Interlochen Arts Camp, and it was my third summer there. And when you go to Interlochen, they have options nowadays where you can stay less than the whole summer. But when I started, you had to stay for 8 weeks, and which is a long time. And when you've been there, when it's your third year, that's a lot of summer camp up there. And I was in junior boys because I went as young as you could go, and that's the youngest division. And I'm not sure if the older divisions, because I didn't go to them, did the same thing. But when you're in junior boys, you would camp out once a week. Like whatever cabin you were in, your cabin would camp out once a week. And you would hike through the woods. And there were like 3 or 4 kind of favorite camping spots. And this is not tents. You carry a sleeping bag, you light a fire, and you sleep circling the fire. And not only would you camp out once a week with your cabin, but I was obsessed with camping at the time. You can't pay me enough money to do it today, but at the time, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with it. Every summer, I would take camping classes. They had like a variety of like camping classes you could take where you learn how to tie knots and light fires and things like that. And they were really only supposed to allow you to take one of those a summer. And I think I was able to take 2 or 3. They were very nice to me and let me do that. And during those classes, you're also camping out a number of times over the summer just for those classes. So I was camping out like 2 times a week, pretty much. So the point of explaining all the camping setup there is that I knew those woods like the back of my hand. In fact, I still do. I haven't been there in decades, and I could still guide you through the forest. I knew every pathway. I knew every secret shortcut. I knew everything about it. So now, on the evening in question, my cabin was having one of its camp nights. And we all decided to camp at a certain spot. I actually think it was my favorite camping spot. I can't remember what it was called. You would leave the cabin and you would hike down this path. You would pass some kind of like homes that were on the side, and then you'd enter the forest. And it was actually an easy place to get to, generally speaking, because you stayed on this main path through the forest, and you would divert to the left after a long period of time, and then you would divert to another left a little bit further along the way, and that would lead you to a river crossing, Little Betsy River. It's not a big river, and you would cross over it from an old toppled over tree, which had kind of created this natural bridge. And you had to be careful crossing the tree trunk over the river because it was very slippery. And if you fell into the river, it wouldn't really hurt you. It's not a big river, but it's cold, it's wet, you don't want to fall in. And they had like a club. If you ever fell into the Little Betsy River, they would, say you're part of the club or something and make it fun. But regardless, you don't want to fall in, especially right before camping for the night. So we cross over. I think there's about 10 to 12 kids in my cabin. And we all cross kind of one at a time because that's the safest way to do it. So we kind of slide our feet one at a time across the bridge. Everybody carrying their backpacks with sleeping bags and things. And not every kid could get across the tree bridge over the river with their backpack on because it created, it's a balance issue and it's very slippery, and some of the kids' backpacks and hiking packs were very heavy. So they would either leave it on one side, they would cross, and the kids that were better at getting across would go and be kind and grab their backpack and come over the log, or even the counselor would help too. And just a couple, maybe a minute and a half walk from the river crossing is our camping spot. So we get to that spot after crossing the river. We lay down our sleeping bags. We start collecting wood and birch bark as tinder. We're getting our stuff together to build a fire and stay for the evening. And we only had one counselor with us, and I cannot remember his name. And right before it gets dark, because it was the evening when we hiked out there, but it was still light. It is summertime. The light, it stays kind of bright, pretty late out there. And so I don't remember what time. I just know it was kind of dusk. And we're underneath these tall pine trees. There's bushes around us. And we start to hear noise in the nearby kind of bushes. And we think it's an animal, so we kind of quiet down. We're like, oh, I hope it's, not a bear or anything. And we're trying to pay attention, and we hear the rustling in the bushes grow louder and louder until something is obviously just on the other side of this like thick shrubbery that's behind our campsite. And suddenly we hear what sounds like an old man yell. "Are you kids? I hate kids." And we all kind of freeze. We can't see who this man is. We can just hear his voice. And I remember distinctly our counselor, who at my age, like 11 years old or so, I thought he was an adult. I considered him an old man. Looking back on it now, he was probably like 18. And I remember distinctly seeing him terrified. And our counselor yells back to the bushes and says, "You're on private property. This is part of Interlaken. You need to get out of here." And the man responds, "I hate kids. I'm going to kill you all tonight. I'm going to fucking cut you up and kill you all tonight." This froze us. Every single kid in my cabin. We were all dead, silent, quiet with fear. Our counselor yelled some things back, of which I do not remember the specifics, and tried to get the guy to leave, was trying to ask who the guy was. That old man kept yelling back to us that he was going to kill us. So our counselor, wisely, was just like, everybody grab all your stuff as fast as you can. We all, rolled up our sleeping bags. He's kind of staying guard at the campsite. The old man, every now and then you'll hear something move in the bushes, and then he would yell something else about hating kids or something like that. We all get our sleeping bags, our backpacks together as fast as we can, and by this time, now it is dark. We go as fast as we can back to the Little Betsy River crossing. And we had to cross the bridge one by one, knowing that that old man was in basically the forest, maybe 20 yards from us. He was not far, and we could still hear him moving. And it's dark. The log to cross the river is slippery. Some of the kids didn't feel like they could carry their big heavy backpacks, which had sleeping bags and canteens and other things in them. So they left them on the shore of one end of the river and crossed without it. And one kid in my cabin was brave enough to kind of cross back and actually carry some of the backpacks for the kids 3 or 4 times as we waited on him to get 3 or 4 of the backpacks across. We all get together. We're on the other side of the river, still feeling petrified, but feeling a little safer knowing there's a bit of water between us and this crazy man in the woods. And then our counselor told me, because I had been there for so many summers and had camped out so many times and knew the woods like the back of my hands, it was dark. He didn't know how to get back to our cabin. So he put me in charge, being a small 11-year-old or so, of guiding everybody back through the forest and back home to safety. And I was so scared. It is the most terrified I've ever been in my entire life, but I definitely remember kind of gladly leading everybody, and we stayed in a single file line. Our counselor was at the very back and I was at the front, using my flashlight, taking us through the forest, and we never heard the guy again. We didn't hear him. As soon as we crossed the river, we didn't hear movement, we didn't hear him yelling, but we made it all the way back to camp. This is a story that I've shared to a handful of people in my life. I don't think I ever told my parents because I didn't want them to worry about me at camp. Now, looking back on this as an adult, I have to say, I think the only reason my parents never found out from the camp, because surely a threatening man in the woods near a summer camp full of kids, that should have been reported. And you would think that all the parents would have heard about it. So looking back on it as an adult, I actually kind of write it off as I think one of the other counselors was probably had a night off, drunk, or maybe even not drunk, and just wanted to pull a prank and was making a voice up and yelling at us. And I think the other members of the camp, the adults, figured out who it was and probably punished him in some fashion. And I think that's the only reason we never heard about that again. Because that is, you don't not tell parents, you don't not call police when there's someone threatening little kids. And again, I look back on it, the counselor, he was terrified as well. He was scared out of his mind. And luckily we made it back home. I know life has its ups and downs and its drama, but to have what sounded like an old scary man threatening you when you can't see who it is, you can only hear it, and you're in the middle of the woods and you're a kid, that is something that I will never forget as long as I live. And that'll do it for our Halloween special, Terrifying Tales Part 1 and Part 2. Thank you all so much for listening and for the support. I am having the time of my life, truly. And thank you to each and every one of my guests for coming on and sharing stories. Don't forget to listen to Tom Holland's interview coming out in just a few days. And make sure to go into the show notes and check out links and information on all the guests I've had on for the Terrifying Tales. I know they'll appreciate it. Please give us a follow on Instagram at A Study of Strange. Send me emails with either stories, ideas, comments. We're up for anything here, astudyofstrange@gmail.com. And obviously, make sure you're subscribed, rated, and reviewed wherever you listen to podcasts. Oh, and I gotta make sure I say this. We are dark the week after Halloween, but we will be back the following week with one of my favorite kind of true crime mysteries that I've come across recently. I am very much looking forward to getting back to true crime and bizarre historical mysteries. Lastly, happy Halloween.